We have the filet
In the middle of a
mignon,
five-star
the lobster
restaurant,
tail,
a
and
white
the
billionaire
vegetarian
switched to
risotto.
Latin, an
I
ancient
need to remember the
language he was
sides for
certain no
each.
server could
And then the
possibly
concierge
understand,
upgraded us
to
to a
mock the
penthouse
black
suite.
waitress standing before him.
Joking.
He
That's
called her a
incredible.
slave.
It certainly was
He
a pleasant
laughed at her.
surprise.
He savored every syllable, convinced she was too ignorant to comprehend a single word. To him, it was just cheap entertainment, a way to remind everyone of his superiority. But when the woman lifted her chin and responded in flawless Latin, the entire room fell silent. What did she say? Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, where are you listening from today? Drop your country in the comments below. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss stories like this one. Now let's get back to what happened that night. The Gilded Lily was not a restaurant for ordinary people. Nestled in the heart of Manhattan, it catered exclusively to those whose net worth exceeded most people's wildest dreams. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in white linen, and the soft clink of silverware against fine china created a symphony of wealth and privilege. Ellie Bennett moved through this world like a ghost. At 27 years old, she had learned to make herself invisible, present enough to serve, absent enough to be forgotten. Her uniform was always pressed, her smile always ready, and her dignity always locked away somewhere deep inside where the customers couldn't reach it. Tonight was no different from any other Saturday night. The restaurant was full, every table occupied by people who spent more on a single bottle of wine than Ellie earned in a week. She had been on her feet since 6 in the morning, first attending her graduate seminar at Columbia, then rushing across the city to start her evening shift. Her feet ached, her eyes burned from lack of sleep. But none of that mattered, not when her mother's hospital bills were piling up, not when her thesis deadline was creeping closer with every passing day. During her brief break, Ellie slipped into the employee locker room and pulled out a worn copy of Cicero's letters. The pages were yellowed and soft from years of handling. She allowed herself exactly 10 minutes to read, her lips moving silently as she translated the ancient Latin in her head. This was her secret refuge, a world where words mattered more than money, where knowledge was the true currency of power. Her co-worker, a young woman named Jessica, poked her head in. "Girl, why do you always read those weird books? What even is that, some kind of code?" Ellie smiled and tucked the book back into her locker. "Something like that." She returned to the floor just in time to see an elderly woman being seated at her usual corner table. Dr. Eleanor Ashford was a regular at the Gilded Lily, a quiet, elegant presence who always requested the same spot by the window where the light was best for reading. Tonight she carried a leather-bound copy of Carlos Aurelius's Meditations, the original Latin text, visible on its spine. Ellie brought over her usual order, a glass of Sancerre and a small plate of olives. Dr. Ashford looked up and offered a warm smile that reached her eyes. It was the kind of smile that made Ellie feel seen, truly seen, in a way that rarely happened in this place. The older woman's gaze lingered for a moment as if she wanted to say something more, but she simply nodded with quiet understanding. "Thank you, dear," she said softly. "You look tired tonight. Take care of yourself." Ellie felt a flicker of warmth at the concern. "I will, ma'am. Thank you." She moved on, unaware that Dr. Ashford's eyes followed her across the room with an expression of deep familiarity. The evening progressed in its familiar rhythm until the front door swung open with unnecessary force and everything changed. Harrison Sterling entered the Gilded Lily like he owned it, which for all Ellie knew he might have. His suit probably cost more than her annual tuition. His watch caught the light with every movement, a gleaming reminder of the vast chasm between their worlds. Beside him walked a woman who looked like she had stepped off a magazine cover, tall, blonde, and draped in a dress that left little to the imagination. Carlos Webb, the restaurant's manager, practically sprinted to greet them. Ellie watched from across the room as Harrison pointed at a table near the center of the restaurant, the best table in the house, currently occupied by a couple celebrating their anniversary. Within minutes, the couple was being relocated with apologetic murmurs and complimentary champagne, their special evening disrupted to accommodate a man who couldn't be bothered to make a reservation. Harrison made a show of removing his expensive Italian jacket, holding it up so everyone could admire the designer label before draping it carefully over the brass hook beside the booth. He smoothed the fabric with exaggerated care, as if the jacket itself deserved more attention than any person in the room. Carlos caught Ellie's eye and gestured her over. His expression was tight the way it always got when dealing with certain kinds of customers. "Ellie, you'll be serving Mr. Sterling tonight," he said in a low voice. "He's a VIP, very important. Be careful with him." She understood what Carlos really meant. Be patient. Be invisible. Don't make waves. Ellie approached the table with her practiced smile firmly in place. "Good evening. Welcome to the Gilded Lily. My name is Ellie, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you off with something to drink?" Harrison didn't look at her. His eyes remained fixed on his companion as he waved a dismissive hand in Ellie's direction. "Vanessa, darling, I certainly hope they hire people here who can actually read the menu." Vanessa giggled a high-pitched sound that grated against Ellie's nerves. "Oh, Harrison, you're terrible." He finally deigned to glance at Ellie, his gaze traveling over her with obvious disdain. "The 1997 Chateau Margaux, and make sure the glass is properly chilled this time. Last place I went to, they served it practically warm, uncivilized." Ellie maintained her composure. "Of course, sir. Excellent choice." She returned with the wine, presenting it for his inspection, before pouring with the precise technique she had perfected over 3 years of working here. Harrison watched her like a hawk waiting for a mistake. When she finished pouring, Harrison reached into his jacket hanging on the hook and withdrew a sleek black wallet. He opened it slowly, deliberately, making sure both Vanessa and anyone watching could see the gleaming Amex Black card nestled inside. "Do you know what this is?" he asked Ellie, holding up the card between 2 fingers like a trophy. Ellie kept her expression neutral. "Your credit card, sir." Harrison laughed a condescending sound. "This isn't just a credit card, sweetheart. This is an Amex Centurion. The black card. You probably don't even know what the credit limit on one of these looks like." He turned to Vanessa with a smirk. "More zeros than she's ever seen in her life, I'd wager." Vanessa giggled again, though something in her eyes flickered perhaps a hint of discomfort at the cruelty of the joke. Harrison made a show of examining the card before sliding it back into his wallet. Then, instead of returning the wallet to his trouser pocket, he reached over and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket on the hook, a casual gesture, but one that Ellie noted. In her years of service, she had learned to observe everything. From her corner table, Dr. Ashford lowered her book slightly, her eyes tracking the movement of Harrison's wallet with quiet attention. "The napkin," Harrison said suddenly. "It's not folded correctly. Can't you see that crease? Do they not train you people at all?" Ellie replaced the napkin without a word. She had learned long ago that arguing with men like Harrison Sterling was pointless. They didn't want solutions. They wanted submission. Throughout the meal, the insults continued in a steady stream. The bread was too cold. The butter was too soft. The steak was half a degree past his preferred temperature. Each complaint was delivered with a smirk, each criticism designed to remind Ellie of her place in his hierarchy. Vanessa participated, at first adding her own cutting remarks whenever Harrison paused for breath. But as the evening wore on, Ellie noticed something change in the woman's expression. There were moments, brief flickers, when Vanessa looked at her with something that might have been embarrassment, or perhaps even guilt. After his 3rd glass of wine, Harrison's voice grew louder, his gestures more expansive. He began regaling Vanessa with stories of his prep school days, his summers in Rome, his supposed mastery of classical languages. "I was top of my Latin class at Exeter," he boasted, swirling the wine in his glass. "Most people these days are so uneducated, so utterly common, they couldn't conjugate a verb to save their lives." Vanessa made appropriate sounds of admiration. That's so impressive, Harrison. I barely passed Spanish in high school. Harrison's eyes slid toward Ellie, who stood nearby, waiting to see if they needed anything else. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Watch this," he murmured to Vanessa. "This will be amusing." He raised his hand and snapped his fingers. "You, come here." Ellie approached the table, her face carefully neutral. Harrison leaned back in his chair and spoke slowly, deliberately, his voice carrying across the quiet restaurant. Every word was in Latin, crisp and clear. "Hanc ancillum nigram specta, nihil intellegit, servi semper servi sunt." Look at this black servant. She understands nothing. Slaves are always slaves. He laughed, delighted with himself, and turned to Vanessa. "See, not a clue. These people, they have no idea what real education looks like." Ellie felt the words land like physical blows. Her stomach turned. Her hands trembled at her sides. She understood every single syllable, the grammar, the syntax, the venom dripping from each carefully chosen word. From across the room, Doctor. Ashford lowered her book completely, her eyes now fixed on the scene unfolding before her. Harrison continued his performance, ordering his dessert in elaborate Latin phrases, intentionally using the most degrading terms he could think of. Around them, other diners shifted uncomfortably. A few looked away. No one spoke up. Ellie stood there, frozen between two impossible choices. She could stay silent, swallow this humiliation, like she had swallowed so many others, and protect her job. The job that paid her mother's medical bills. The job that kept the lights on in their tiny apartment. Or she could speak. She thought of her mother's voice, a memory from childhood. "Baby girl, you're going to have to be twice as strong just to be treated half as well. That's the world we live in. But don't you ever let anyone make you forget who you are." Harrison was watching her now, waiting for the confusion, the embarrassment, the defeat. He expected her to bow her head and walk away, just another servant who didn't know her place had been so thoroughly insulted. Ellie took a deep breath. She thought about the hospital bills. She thought about her thesis. She thought about everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed. Then she thought about her dignity, the one thing she had promised herself she would never sell. She lifted her chin and met Harrison Sterling's eyes with a steady, unwavering gaze. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Act 2. Ellie's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Dominus qui servos despicit saepe ipse servus est suae superbiae." The Latin flowed from her lips with a precision and elegance that made Harrison's earlier attempts sound like a child stumbling through a nursery rhyme. Her pronunciation was impeccable, her grammar flawless, her meaning devastatingly clear. He who despises servants is often himself a slave to his own arrogance. Harrison's smirk froze on his face. His wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. Ellie wasn't finished. She continued in the same measured tone, her eyes never leaving his. "Lingua Latina non est scutum ignominiae sed clavis sapientiae." The Latin language is not a shield for shame, but a key to wisdom. A murmur rippled through the restaurant. Nearby diners exchanged glances, their eyebrows raised in astonishment. Someone at a table near the window let out a soft, incredulous laugh. Ellie tilted her head slightly, her expression calm and professional. "And, sir, if I may, your conjugation of intelligit was correct. But your use of servi in the nominative plural when you clearly intended the genitive singular suggests your Latin education may have been somewhat incomplete." The color drained from Harrison's face, then rushed back in a furious red. His jaw worked silently, as if his brain couldn't quite process what had just happened. Vanessa stared at Ellie with wide eyes, her perfectly glossed lips parted in shock. For the first time that evening, she looked at the waitress not as a servant to be mocked, but as a person who had just accomplished something remarkable. Ellie allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "Now, would you like to continue ordering in Latin, sir? I'm also fluent in ancient Greek, should you prefer. Or perhaps English would be more comfortable for everyone." From her corner table, Dr. Eleanor Ashford set down her book. A quiet smile played at the corners of her mouth as she watched the scene unfold. She gave an almost imperceptible nod, the kind of acknowledgement that passed between scholars who recognized excellence when they saw it. The silence stretched for 3 long seconds. Then scattered applause broke out from a table near the back. An older gentleman raised his glass in Ellie's direction. A woman dining alone covered her mouth to hide her grin. Harrison Sterling had never been humiliated in his life. He had grown up in a world where his last name opened every door, where his money smoothed every path, where his word was law simply because he had the wealth to make it so. He had never been corrected by a servant. He had certainly never been made to look like a fool in front of a room full of his peers. The rage that surged through him was volcanic. "You!" He sputtered, his hand gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. "How dare you speak to me like that?" Ellie's expression remained neutral. "I apologize if my response was unexpected, sir. I was simply engaging with you in the language you chose." Harrison's eyes darted around the room, taking in the amused faces, the whispered conversations, the phones that had suddenly appeared in several hands. His reputation, the carefully cultivated image of the cultured, sophisticated billionaire, was crumbling before his eyes. Vanessa reached out and touched his arm. "Harrison, maybe we should just go. This isn't worth—" He shook her off violently. "Don't touch me!" The sharpness of his voice made Vanessa flinch. Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the admiration she had always shown him. She pulled her hand back slowly, her eyes narrowing as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Harrison's mind raced, searching for a way to regain control. He couldn't leave like this. He couldn't let some waitress, some nobody destroy him in front of all these people. He needed to turn this around. He needed to make her the villain. And then it came to him. His expression transformed from rage to cold calculation. He reached toward his jacket on the hook and made a show of checking his wallet. His eyes went wide with theatrical shock. "My credit card," he announced loudly, his voice carrying across the restaurant. "My Amex Black card. It's gone." He turned to stare at Ellie, his finger pointing directly at her face. You stole it." The accusation hit Ellie like a physical blow. She took an involuntary step backward, her composure cracking for the first time. "I'm sorry, what?" she managed. Harrison stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Everyone heard me. This woman has been serving my table all night. She's had access to my jacket, my belongings, and now my card is missing." He looked around the room, playing to his audience. A card worth over $100,000 in credit, I might add. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted instantly. The amused glances turned suspicious. The whispered conversations took on a different tone. Ellie could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, and she knew exactly what many of them were thinking. A black waitress. An accusation of theft. The math was simple in their minds, and the answer was written in their prejudices. Carlos Webb rushed over his face, pale with anxiety. "Mr. Sterling, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Ellie is one of our most trusted employees. She would never—" Harrison cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Are you calling me a liar? Do you know who I am? I play golf with the owner of this establishment every single week. One phone call from me and you'll be out of a job by morning." Carlos swallowed hard. Ellie watched the conflict play out on his face, the desire to do the right thing, warring with the very real fear of losing everything. In the end, fear won. "Ellie," he said quietly, unable to meet her eyes, "maybe you should cooperate, just to clear this up." "Cooperate?" Ellie's voice cracked slightly. "Carlos, I haven't done anything wrong." I know, he said, still not looking at her. "But if you have nothing to hide, then there's no problem, right? Just let us check and this will all be over." The betrayal stung more than Ellie expected. 3 years she had worked here. 3 years of perfect performance reviews, of covering extra shifts, of going above and beyond for customers who rarely bothered to learn her name. And now, when it mattered most, the man who was supposed to protect her couldn't even look her in the eye. Around them, more phones had appeared. Ellie could see the red recording lights blinking like accusatory eyes. This moment, this humiliation was being captured from a dozen different angles. By tomorrow, she would be a viral video, a hashtag, a cautionary tale shared by strangers who would never know her name, but would feel entitled to judge her entire existence. Harrison pressed his advantage. "Well, what are you waiting for? Check her pockets. Check the employee area. Check whatever you need to check." He crossed his arms, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. Unless, of course, she has something to hide. Ellie's mind raced through her options, each one more impossible than the last. If she refused to be searched, she looked guilty. If she submitted to being searched, she was admitting that a wealthy white man's baseless accusation was enough to strip her of her dignity. Either way, Harrison won. She thought about her mother lying in that hospital bed, the tubes and wires keeping her alive, while the bills piled up on the nightstand. She thought about her thesis, 2 years of research that would be worthless if she was arrested, if her record was tainted, if Columbia decided a theft accusation, even a false one, was too much of a liability. She thought about her father gone too soon, who had worked himself to the bone to give her opportunities he never had. What would he say if he could see her now, standing in the middle of a fancy restaurant, while rich people decided whether she was a criminal? The memories washed over her like a wave every time a teacher had assumed she cheated because her essay was too well written, every time a store security guard had followed her through the aisles, every time someone had clutched their purse a little tighter when she walked by. A lifetime of small indignities that added up to this moment, this accusation, this public trial by the court of wealth and privilege. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. She would not give them that satisfaction. Vanessa stood up slowly. Her face was troubled, her earlier playfulness completely gone. "Harrison, are you sure about this? Maybe the car just fell somewhere. Maybe you left it in the car." Harrison turned on her with a snarl. "Whose side are you on? I know what happened. I know what I saw." Vanessa took a step back, her expression hardening. "I'm just saying this feels wrong. She's standing right there. She hasn't tried to run. She hasn't done anything except embarrass you, and now suddenly she's a thief." For a moment, something dangerous flickered in Harrison's eyes, but he controlled himself, smoothing his features back into a mask of righteous indignation. "Vanessa, darling, you're too trusting. It's one of your most charming qualities, but in this case it's misguided." He turned back to Carlos. "I want her searched, and I want the police called. Now." Carlos pulled out his phone with shaking hands. Ellie watched him dial, watched her future unravel with each passing second. "Please," she said softly. "I didn't take anything. I swear to you I didn't take anything." No one responded. No one met her eyes. She was alone in a room full of people surrounded by witnesses who had already decided she was guilty. The weight of it pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. 3 years of perfect performance, a lifetime of playing by the rules of being twice as good to be considered half as worthy, and none of it mattered. None of it had ever mattered. She closed her eyes, preparing herself for the worst. And then from the corner of the restaurant came the clear, sharp sound of a glass being set down on a table with deliberate force. "I think," said a calm, authoritative voice, "that we need to stop this charade right now." Ellie's eyes flew open. Dr. Eleanor Ashford rose from her chair with the unhurried grace of someone who had spent a lifetime commanding attention without ever having to raise her voice. She moved toward the center of the room, her presence somehow filling the space in a way that made everyone else seem smaller. Harrison turned to face this new interruption, his expression contemptuous. "And who exactly are you? This is a private matter." Dr. Ashford smiled, but there was no warmth in it. My name is Eleanor Ashford, Professor Emerita of Classical History and Ancient Languages at Columbia University, and I have been watching this entire performance from the beginning. She stopped a few feet away from Harrison, her eyes locked on his with an intensity that made him take an involuntary step backward. What I have witnessed tonight, she continued, is not a theft. It is a fraud, and the perpetrator is not the young woman you are so eager to condemn. Act 3. Harrison's face contorted with indignation. I don't care who you are. This doesn't concern you. Dr. Ashford moved closer, her gaze unwavering. On the contrary, Mr. Sterling, it concerns me very much. She turned to address the room, her voice carrying with the practiced clarity of someone who had spent decades commanding lecture halls. I have been seated at that corner table since before you arrived. I have watched every moment of this evening's events, and I can tell you exactly what happened to your credit card. She pointed toward Harrison's table where his jacket hung on the brass hook beside the booth. When you ordered that 1997 Chateau Margaux, you removed your wallet from your inside jacket pocket. You took out the card, examined it as though you wanted everyone to see it, then replaced it in your wallet. And then you put the wallet back, not in your trouser pocket, but in the inside pocket of that jacket, hanging right there. Every head in the restaurant turned toward the jacket. Harrison's mouth opened, then closed. A vein pulsed visibly at his temple. Dr. Ashford continued, her tone almost gentle now, the way a teacher might correct a particularly slow student. The card never left your possession, Mr. Sterling. This young woman never touched your belongings. The only thing she did was respond to your cruelty with intelligence and grace, and apparently that was enough to make you want to destroy her. Carlos Webb moved quickly to the jacket and reached into the inside pocket. His hand emerged, holding a black leather wallet. He opened it, and there, gleaming in its designated slot, was an Amex black card with Harrison Sterling's name embossed in silver. The silence that followed was absolute. Then came the whispers spreading through the restaurant like wildfire. Phones that had been recording Ellie now turned toward Harrison, capturing his humiliation from every angle. The narrative had shifted completely. He was no longer the victim, he was the villain. Harrison lunged toward Carlos. Give me that. That proves nothing. She could have put it back when no one was looking. Dr. Ashford shook her head slowly. Mr. Sterling, I have been watching this young woman all evening. She has been nowhere near your jacket. The only person who touched that coat was you when you hung it up upon arrival. Her eyes narrowed. What you have done tonight is not merely embarrassing. It is potentially criminal. Filing a false police report, defamation, attempting to weaponize racial prejudice against an innocent woman, these are serious matters. Vanessa stepped away from the table, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. Her face was pale, her earlier admiration replaced by something cold and final. I've seen enough, she said, her voice flat. Harrison reached for her arm. Vanessa, wait. You don't understand. I was just... She pulled away before he could touch her. I understand perfectly, Harrison. I understand exactly who you are now. She walked toward the exit without looking back, her designer dress swishing with each deliberate step. Harrison stood frozen, watching her leave. For the first time that evening, he looked truly lost, a man whose money and status could not buy him out of the hole he had dug for himself. A man at a nearby table stood up, pulling a small notepad from his jacket pocket. Mr. Sterling, I'm David Morrison, reporter for the New York Times. Would you care to comment on what just happened here tonight? The color drained from Harrison's face. He looked around the room at the recording phones, at the contemptuous stares, at the complete collapse of everything he had built his identity upon. Without another word, he grabbed his jacket from the hook and strode toward the exit. His shoulders hunched as if trying to make himself smaller. The door swung shut behind him, and he was gone. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the older gentleman who had raised his glass earlier began to clap. Others joined in, and soon the entire restaurant was applauding not the polite, restrained applause of high society, but genuine appreciation for what they had witnessed. Ellie stood in the middle of it, all overwhelmed. Her hands were still trembling, though now from relief rather than fear. She felt tears threatening to spill over, but held them back through sheer force of will. Carlos approached her, his head bowed with shame. "Ellie, I am so sorry. I should have defended you. I should have trusted you. I was a coward, and I have no excuse." Ellie looked at him for a long moment. 3 years of loyalty, and he had been ready to throw her to the wolves at the first sign of pressure. But she also saw the fear in his eyes, the weight of his own struggles. She knew what it was like to be trapped between impossible choices. "I understand the position you were in," she said finally. "But next time remember that your employees are people too. We have families. We have dreams. We deserve to be protected, not sacrificed." Carlos nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "You're right. You're absolutely right." Dr. Ashford appeared at Ellie's side, her expression warm for the first time that evening. She placed a gentle hand on the younger woman's shoulder. "My dear," she said softly, "why didn't you tell me about your situation? The night shifts, the financial pressure. I had no idea you were struggling so much." Ellie swallowed hard. "I didn't want anyone to feel sorry for me, Professor. I wanted to earn my place to prove I could handle everything on my own." Dr. Ashford smiled, and there was something like pride in her eyes. "That is precisely why I have always believed in you, Ellie. Your resilience, your determination, your refusal to ask for help, even when you desperately need it, these qualities will serve you well in academia." She squeezed Ellie's shoulder gently. "But from now on, let me help. You don't have to carry this alone." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "There is a paid position available, a teaching assistant role in my department. The salary is modest, but it would be enough to cover your expenses without requiring you to work these brutal hours. And I know of a foundation that provides grants for graduate students with family medical emergencies. I will personally recommend you." Ellie stared at the card in her hand. After everything that had happened tonight, this small rectangle of paper felt like a lifeline. "Professor Ashford, I don't know what to say." The older woman patted her arm. "Say you'll accept. Say you'll let me help you finish what you started. Your thesis on Latin's influence on Renaissance literature is too important to be derailed by circumstances beyond your control." Ellie nodded, not trusting her voice. Around them, the restaurant was slowly returning to normal. Diners were settling their bills, whispering about what they had witnessed, already composing the stories they would tell. Ellie knew that by tomorrow this night would be everywhere on social media, in news articles shared by people who would never know her name but would remember what she had done. She walked to the employee locker room one last time. Her hands were steady now as she untied her apron and folded it neatly, placing it on the counter where she had placed it so many times before. She opened her locker and retrieved the worn copy of Cicero's letters, running her fingers over the familiar cover. Carlos appeared in the doorway. "Ellie, if you ever need anything, a reference, a recommendation, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." She tucked the book under her arm and gave him a small nod. "Thank you, Carlos. Take care of yourself." She walked through the kitchen, past the servers and cooks, who had heard what happened and watched her with new respect in their eyes. Jessica grabbed her hand as she passed. "Girl, that was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. You're a legend." Ellie squeezed her friend's hand briefly, then continued toward the back exit. She stepped out into the cool Manhattan night. The city hummed around her taxis, honking distant laughter, the endless pulse of life that never stopped no matter what dramas played out in fancy restaurants. She stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the night air fill her lungs. Above her, the sky was clear for once, a few stubborn stars managing to shine through the light pollution. She thought about her father gone too soon and wondered if he could see her now. She thought about her mother fighting her own battle in a hospital bed across the city. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and read the message from the hospital. Update on patient Bennett, condition stabilized. Doctor pleased with progress. We'll call tomorrow with details. Ellie closed her eyes and allowed herself one moment of pure relief. When she opened them again, she was smiling, not the practiced smile she wore for customers, but something real, something that came from deep within. She began walking, leaving the gilded lily behind her. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement, and somewhere in the distance, a saxophone played a lonely melody. She didn't know exactly what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. Language had been used as a weapon against her tonight, but in the end, it had become her shield, her sword, and her salvation. Harrison Sterling had tried to prove that she didn't belong in his world, and instead he had proven that his world wasn't worthy of her. Ellie Bennett walked into the night, her head held high, carrying nothing but a worn book of Latin letters and the knowledge that no one, not wealth, not power, not prejudice, could ever take away who she truly was. And that's Ellie's story. Here's what I hope you take away from it. Your worth is never defined by how others see you. Not by your job title, not by your bank account, not by the assumptions people make when they look at you. The things that truly matter, your knowledge, your dignity, your character, those are things no one can take from you unless you let them. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another one. I share stories like this every week, stories about ordinary people who refuse to be broken by extraordinary circumstances. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever had a moment where you had to stand up for yourself even when everything was against you? I'd love to hear your story. Until next time, remember, the people who try to make you feel small are usually the ones who feel smallest inside. Keep your head high.